So, we present to you the 4D cityscape time puzzle of London. I saw this in catalogues all over the place a few years ago, but I finally got one on the cheap side after all these years, because they were something like £40. And what do you get for that £40? Well, you get a jigsaw puzzle with holes in it that you can slot in models of pretty much every famous building in London, and making a 3D jigsaw puzzle. But where does the 4D come in? Well, it also claims that if you put the buildings in the right order, you can see how London has built up over time. And the puzzle's actually got two layers, so you start with a map of London in medieval times, and then you build the modern one on top. And I really like that. I like the fact that they actually have a 4D and have a legitimate claim to be 4D. Usually when they say it, oh, this film's in 4D, when really what it is, it's in 3D, but you're recreating the third dimension really badly with stupid glasses that give 10% of people headaches. But no, time is legitimately thought of as the fourth dimension. When things travel through time, they change shape slightly, technically due to relativity. It's all quite complicated, and that squashing is actually meant to be something changing shape in the fourth dimension. I massively oversimplify that, but don't worry, you're never going to use it anyway. Trust me, it's like physics is actually really useless, and you shouldn't spend 4 years studying it. Anyway, back to the puzzle. I was going to construct it to see just how well it holds up. Is it really as good as the £40 they were asking for it? But thankfully, the people who were giving this puzzle away didn't break it up properly. So I get to do my Blue Peter thing. Here's one I prepared earlier. Yes, so that's the phase 1, as they call it in the instructions, which kind of makes it sound like a sinister plot. So yes, this is London in the year 1666, the year of the Great Fire. Okay, not quite medieval times, but this is the Great Fire pretty much did change the landscape of London, because they had to rebuild most of it, obviously, and did it in a much safer and more modernised way. So yeah, it's pretty. This is a pretty good place to start, basically. So we have our massive bag of models, and we have this large poster that is too big for me to fold out properly, but it's basically a timeline of when all the buildings were built. So we start off with the Tower of London, 1078, Westminster Abbey, 1517, Globe Theatre, 1599, and they do get very specific here. They actually insist that you remove the Globe Theatre immediately afterwards, because it was burnt down, and then the fire, and then that's when you build the second layer. I mean, I know it's got a legitimate point, but putting a piece on the puzzle just to remove it straight after does seem a bit ridiculous. So anyway, let's put on the 3 models we need to put on before we burn it all down. So we have the Tower of London in the top here. That goes this way round on here. Okay, so far so good. I'm just going to pause to find the other two. Back in a minute. Right, got it. So Westminster Abbey goes over here, which is where Isaac Newton, Oscar Wilde and so forth are buried. And the Globe Theatre, I can't see a spot for it. It should be down here somewhere in Southwark, I believe. Oh, hold on, there is a... if you do get stuck, there is a map showing where everything should be. So I think it should be about there, but even on the helpful hint map, it doesn't really give much of a suggestion. But then, hey, who cares? We're going to be removing it right now. Okay, now we have the Great Fire of London, which we're going to recreate by building a layer on it. Okay, something about this I don't like. If you look carefully at the first layer, you see there's this little tab that's decorated to look like the second layer, and it's coupling quite strong double-sided sticky tape. I don't know if this could be a previous owner doing this, or it could be the manufacturers making sure that the two bits stick together. But I don't know. I don't like doing that because it kind of feels almost permanent. You'd be risking damage if you tried to deconstruct it. I mean, I know it's all meant to be affected by the fourth dimension and everything, but and time doesn't go backwards, so you know you can't say it's not being unrealistic. But I don't know. I'm not a fan of it. And once you've done that, you should have something that looks a lot like this. So they've been quite clever and left the original River Thames from the first puzzle showing. And if you look, we still have our Tower of London and our Westminster Abbey, but they're much more sunken down a bit, which is again quite realistic, because I've been to the Tower of London, and if you look, it's actually there's this big dippy hill, so it's still on its original ground, and you can see how much dirt has sort of collected around London since 1078. So now we have to put all these buildings, old and new, onto it, with our only guide being this ridiculously large poster. Let's see, we start with St. Paul's Cathedral. Let's go through it all properly. Which was built to replace the original St. Paul's that was destroyed in the fire. It was sort of the masterwork of Sir Christopher Wren. Here it is. I have to say, it's a very snug fit. I was having trouble fitting those two pieces in, and this is proving to be no exception. Still, there we go. What's next? Buckingham Palace. Okay, you might notice while they have gone to really exquisite details on some of these buildings, it's still kind of hard to tell from above what the buildings look like, because you know we usually only ever see them from the side. So which one looks like Buckingham Palace? Is it this one? It's a bit too big even for the Queen, but well, this is a potential deal breaker if you don't like this sort of puzzles. Okay, right. Let's look on the map. I know where Buckingham Palace is on a map. So it's going to be this sort of a shape. Oh, it's this one. There we go. When was that built, by the way? 1702. I read it was done by George IV, but that can't be right. Next is the Bank of England. Oh, okay. So this is the Bank of England. It's a bit of a weirder shape than I thought, and it goes here in the city. Actually, shall I cut away to a bit later, because this is going to get quite boring for you. I've come across something that doesn't seem quite right to me. I'm in the mid-1700s and just constructed Trafalgar Square. Now, I mean, I know the National Gallery's big, and Buckingham Palace is quite big, but I didn't really think those two are actually that close together, because there's this massive great park and what's it called that the house where Lady Di lived should be in between them, but here they're right next to each other with very little space. I mean, and the mall seems quite short, because the mall goes from it's meant to go from here to here, but it's barely that long. I mean, is there something wrong with the scale of this, or am I just imagining things? Or is that meant to be a Clarence House? That's what I was thinking. Is that meant to be Clarence House that's somehow part of the National Gallery? Does anyone even know what I'm talking about? Well, we've just reached the 20th century here in this fantastical time-travelling voyage by constructing Westminster Cathedral here, which seems, again, remarkably close to the Abbey. I've actually visited the Abbey before, and I never saw Westminster Cathedral anywhere near. I would have wanted to go because it's quite an interesting building. Anyways, let's keep on going. County Hall is next. That should be an easy building to find. Yep, this is it, with its sort of crescent area. Home to the London Aquarium. Actually, I think it's no longer independent now as Sea Life. And it used to have the movie museum before it moved to Covent Garden, which it's a shame. I really liked their Covent Garden premise. I mean, I really liked their County Hall premises. Okay. The Unilever House. Okay, so we got our first building sponsored by a corporation, and that was in the 1930s, so quite early. It's a bit of a weird shape, actually. I'm going to have to look this one up just to see if my suspicions are correct. Number 16. Yeah, it's this weird hook-shaped one that I would have said that was a more modern design. Oh, this is proving to be one of the tightest fits yet. Oh, there we go. Battersea Power Station. Sadly, it doesn't have a large inflatable pig floating out of it. So it is getting a bit tiring, all this fitting. I would have expected a bit more leeway, but then I suppose you couldn't really made the holes any wider in areas like this, or indeed even in areas like this. This is going to be fun filling in Canary Wharf. But yeah, if I wanted to fit things into tight holes, I could have just had my normal Saturday evening routine. Right, what's next? The upstream building. We may be hitting a bit of a problem because we're starting to hit the concrete years of brutalist architecture, where basically all the buildings in this area is just going to be represented by a large cuboid, and there are quite a lot of large cuboids to tell apart here. Okay, so we're up to 1964. I've just put in the post office tower over here. Pretty much seems to be the only building of interest in this area, which is a shame. But look what we've got to contend with after that. Centre Point, big rectangle. City Point Britannic House, big rectangle. St Helens Tower, big rectangle. Stock Exchange, big Kent House, big rectangle. Kingswich Tower, big rectangle. Cromwell Tower, Guy's House Tower, Lauderdale, Shakespeare, 99 Bishopsgate. I mean, it's... Come on, people in the 70s. I know you were really depressed by the 3-day weeks and the awful, itchy fashions, but come on. At this point, I do have my own strategy. Basically, look at the identification number on each building. Look at it on the map of hints, the magical map of hints, that's what it will be called. And basically find it on this map, really closely study the shape, and have a look at that, try and find that shape on the underside of each building. It's not what I'd really hoped for, but you know. So many people buzzing like flies round Waterloo Station. Anyway, so I've built it up to the point that this is what London would look like at the start of 1973, if all the uninteresting buildings were steamrolled flat by some mad idea by Arnie Macmillan. I did look, after looking at bases for so long, I did realise they did have very tiny numbers printed on it, which means I can at least confirm by my guesses. I don't know if there's any point trying to show off these numbers. They are really quite small. But no, I can't do it that way. But yeah, that does help a little bit if you're unsure if the building you've decided on through this method is actually the right one. So let's keep going. Cromwell Tower. Well, it took us to 1978, but we finally got a building with an interesting shape again. This is apparently the Sea Containers House, located on the banks just off Tate Modern. Oh, it's a bit lopsided. The problem with having foam jigsaw pieces is that you have bits, you sort of have the pattern peeling off quite easily, which can make it quite uneven and scruffy looking. Anyway, what's next? Tower 42. Ah, this should be an interesting one, because Tower 42 is where NatWest are based, and they built their headquarters to actually look like their logo from above. Quite clever. I can't think of any other examples of a building advertising purely to helicopters. Where does that go? And in it goes. Still got a while before the city becomes the sort of massive tower of spikes it usually is. And Westminster's looking quite nice and full, but then it is a protected area, so I'm not expecting any more buildings to be built up on there. And it looks like we're going to have a few more boring boxes to take us through to the 1990s. But anyway, check it out. This is London circa 1991. and that's when we start getting some development over here in the east, in the Canary Wharf building, although right now I'm just at Cabot Place, and I'm sure in real life there's going to be a lot of building works around here. I suppose this is going to look far too clean. Quite a massive undertaking, I guess. What's up next? Filling up the rest of Cabot Square here. Then we build the 1 Canada Square, incorrectly called the Canary Wharf Tower because it was the tallest building in the area and the tallest building in London until the shaft came along. So there's quite a lot. Because I do visit London quite a lot, I'm full of knowledge like this. I'm full of a lot of other stuff as well, I'm sure many people would like to point out to me. Well, here it is, back by popular demand. The Globe Theatre, after being burnt down 500 years ago. We should go there, see a play there one day. I've done the tour of it, but not actually seen anything there. And that takes us up to the Millennium, so it's time to build in all of the wonderful things London built to celebrate that. Starting with the London Eye. Kind of sad this one doesn't spin. So, let's all meet up in the year 2000. Won't it be strange when we're all fully grown? He's there 2 o'clock by the fountain down the road. It's sitting in the Millennium Dome here. I still can't call it the O2 Arena yet, and I remember, because I was only about 4 when the Millennium happened, I do remember all the big hype around it, but I never really got to celebrate it properly myself. I mean, I know it's just a year, but it seemed like a bigger reflection looking to the past and the future, which is what this jigsaw puzzle is all about, so it's quite apt. Actually, I need to fit in another building in Canary Wharf while I'm at it. Well, with the inputting of the Broadgate Tower, we've got the entire cityscape of London at the time this puzzle was made. It's got a bit easier afterwards, mainly in thanks to the Gherkin, or the Swiss RE Tower, which did cause a bit of a revolution in the architectural world. The fact that it was able to create such a perfect curved plane with only flat pieces got a lot of design awards, and started a new engineer in modern architecture. Unfortunately, in this version, it kind of just looks more like a sex toy. But you may notice there are still holes in our jigsaw. But how come? Well, in an amazing adherence to the time-traveling 4D aspect, they actually included in this puzzle a lot of buildings that were still being built in 2010, the year this was made, and it should take us all the way up till 2014. It's 2015 now, so we'll be able to see just how accurate this is. Okay, so so we start off with the Heron Tower, which I put in there. And then we have the Pinnacle, which is this weird building with a swirly thing on the end. I think this is still being built, technically. In fact, it says it's scheduled to be completed in 2012, but I think it's got it the wrong way around. Let's try this way around. It's just a triangle shape, but it is a bit more detailed, really. There it is. Then we have Leadenhall Tower, sort of nicknamed the Cheese Grater. Actually, this goes in here, and I actually remember learning in geography the reason why they had to build it at such a weird sort of a slanted edge. It's so you could still get a perfect view of St. Paul's Cathedral from the other side of the city, because it's such an iconic view that they needed to preserve it. We have this set of buildings that goes over in Canary Wharf, which is now completely unrecognisable from the dry docks that it used to be. Obviously, they became obsolete when when ships became too big to come down the River Thames. Oh God, there we go. Got it in there. And then we have the pièce de résistance, the Shard, which has actually been completed now, which is good. And finally, we have a very weird. I mean, I've never understood how they managed to create a building of this weird shape, but this is Fenchurch Street Tower, which is over here. But yeah, it sort of looks like a outdated mobile phone. It sort of looks like an outdated mobile phone, and I seem to remember reading stories that it was warping in areas of high heat, which is probably not having the best of times right now. So, well, hopefully, I think it has been completed though, and that was scheduled for completion in 2014. So yeah, that's the London of the future. Again, I give it proper dues for actually being properly 4D instead of it just being a random buzzword, and it certainly makes for a much more visually interesting site than most Jigsaw puzzles. It's a bit fiddly and probably a bit confusing, but the concept is straightforward, and I think many fans of geography, architectural things would actually enjoy this quite a lot. So yeah, so let's finish this off in style.